You want to know something? In a world that often celebrates success in terms of wealth, power, and fame, there's a different kind of success that's often overlooked. Do you want to know what that is? Or do you know what that is? Or take a guess? Well, let me just not have you have to do all of that. Let me tell you what it is. And it's this: it's a success of a fulfilling and God-centered life. Okay. Now, before you kind of run away and thinking that, wait a minute, are you serious? Well, yes, I am, my friend, because I'm going to make the case today of why that is so important and why you don't want to turn that dial. So today we are going to explore how high aspiring Christian business professional husbands. Yes, you heard me right. Now, if you're not a husband, you say, I'm a wife. Well, that's why you want to stay tuned and listen, because you want to be able to take this and tell your husband he needs to watch or listen to this just in case he's not, right? But I want to make the case of why high achieving Christian business professional husbands, how they can achieve for true fulfillment in all aspects of life, from their marriages and families to their careers and to their communities, right? Wherever that community might be. So, as I make this case in this episode, which, by the way, for those who are listening via the podcast, this is episode number 77. I want to make the case and show how that by embracing Christian principles, how high aspiring or high achieving Christian business professional husbands can not only achieve great things in their careers, but also build bulletproof marriages, raise exceptional children, and leave a lasting legacy of faith, of love, and impact. All of those things we're going to unpack in this episode, this video that you are watching. This scripture verse, one of my favorites. I quote this so often, and that is in Proverbs 3, verse 5 and 6, where the King Solomon, the wisest man outside of Jesus who ever lived, said this. He said, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not, that's pivotal, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him or submit to him, and he, God, will make your paths straight. God promised that he would do that for you and for me. I love this quote by Frank Clark. He said this: a man's true wealth is not in his possessions, but it's in the character of his family. A man's true wealth is not in his possession, but in the character of his family. I love this idea of what about raising kids, right? It's like trying to manage a small company. There are constant negotiations, performance reviews, and occasional product recalls, right? It feels that way sometimes as a husband and as a dad. But remember, this is your and mine legacy, our true legacy that we're working towards, and the most important in our lives. If you happen to not watch the last video that I created, you may want to go back, not go back right now, but after this, watch that video, because I kind of mentioned some of these ideas in that video that I think is important for you to also watch as well. A study by the Harvard Grant Study found that men who were more religious and had strong family ties were happier and healthier than their less religious peers. Imagine that. That is true. That's been made. The case had been made for that. So I'm not just making that up. It's studies that have shown that more than on one occasion, different kinds of studies that have proven that and made the case for that. So if you're going to build marriage bulletproof marriages, raise exceptional children, and leave a lasting legacy of faith, love, and impact, you must do these 6 things. You must do these 6 things. So the first one I want to mention, the first point is this: you must seek God's guidance and wisdom. That goes without saying. And that's the first thing, first idea, right? I mentioned in the last video where I unpack what Jesus said: first seek the kingdom of God, and everything else you need will be added to you. And I kind of unpack that in that context. You may want to go back and watch or listen to that as well. So seek God's wisdom, guidance and wisdom. Now, seeking God's guidance and wisdom is the practice of actively turning to God for direction, for understanding, and decision making in all aspects of life. Now, you do that through prayer, devotion times, reading God's word, right? Those two are very, very important key to be able to know what God says about a certain thing. So you're going to seek God's wisdom, read the Bible, and seek his wisdom, his guidance. Read the Bible, his wisdom, by praying, and God promised he would give that to you. As a matter of fact, he says in James chapter 1, verse 5, he said, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault. And he says, he will give that to you. He will give that to you. You know, I love this quote again by my favorite author in the Old Testament, King Solomon. He says this: a man who seeks God's guidance before he makes a decision is wise, while a man who acts without God's guidance is a fool. Imagine that. Let that sink in. A man who seeks God's guidance before he makes a decision, especially when it comes to his family, his career, his future, his children, he said, if you seek God's wisdom, guidance first, you're wise. While a man who acts without God's guidance is a fool. Really, he is, and she is, right? So, but in this case, he is. Now, in my own life, I've found that whenever I've made decisions based on my own pride or ego or fear, or just not seeking God, not, just thinking I could figure things out, when I've done that, I have almost always ended up regretting it. How about you? Have you found that to be true also in your life? But when I have taken the time to seek God's guidance, even when it's meant going against the natural inclinations or my instincts, I've always found myself on a better path. Sometimes not immediately, not right away, right? Because sometimes God takes time to show himself to us, and it takes a while sometimes to see that by acting in what we believe God's placed on our hearts, we made better decisions at that time. I think you could also attest to that if you are concurring with what I've said so far. Now, the second point is this: if you are going to be, like I mentioned, if you're going to be the husband that is going to build bulletproof marriages, raise exceptional children, and leave a lasting legacy of faith, love, and impact, you must, in point number 2, is operate with unconditional love and selflessness. Operate with unconditional love and selflessness. Now, it's not as easy as it sounds, and I'm going to be the first to say that, right? Because unconditional love is a love that is not based on any conditions or expectations. So right away, we know we are being challenged to do something that is beyond us, our natural ability and inclination. So it is a love that accepts and values the other person for who they are, regardless of their flaws or shortcomings, right? So the key is to be able to accept and love people for who they are, not for what they do. I tell my children, and they can attest to this, that they can never do anything that I will stop loving them. I will always love my children. I have 2 kids. or to adults, but I've said that to them when they were much younger. But here's what I said. I said, I don't have to necessarily like what you've done. I won't love the fact you did certain things that are, I believe, are against our values or against the law. That I will never subscribe and say, I like the fact you did that or love that you did that. No, but them, I will always love them no matter what. That's unconditional love. And where did I learn that? I learned that from God, because God himself have loved me and loved you unconditionally, right? So to be selfless, it means it's a quality of being concerned more with the needs and wishes of others than with one's own self, like me, you. It's ability or being able to do that. Again, that does not come natural. It does not come easy. And that's why I said earlier, you got to seek God's wisdom, because unless God helps us to do that, our natural inclination is to self-preserve, right? Is self-centered, is us first. And so if we're going to be able to be selfless and unconditional in our love, we've got to seek God and get his help on the matter. The greatest love chapter in the Bible, there are many, but the one that stands out and so many people know and remember is First Corinthians 13, 4 verse 7. It says, love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. That is what First Corinthians 13, verse 4 to 7 says. That is unconditional love. So one of the exercises I've always heard, and I've also done myself too, and challenged people to do, is when they read that chapter and those verses, is where it says love is patient or love is kind and so on, insert your name there and see how far you could get in that verse. Because, for example, I could say Kingsley is patient, Kingsley is kind, Kingsley does not envy, Kingsley does not boast, Kingsley is not proud, Kingsley does not dishonor others, Kingsley is not you see, I'm going to trail off because I got to hit those things. And if I'm being honest, I could not put my name in every single one of those and said I have hit them 100%. No, I have failed at times, but it keeps challenging us and challenging you and I to raise the banner when it comes to unconditional love. And this is a great framework for which to constantly insert your name and see how well you're doing. And I want to challenge you to see where you are in this process, this journey. This quote by Herb Brooks, he says this: the greatest gift a father can give his children is unconditional love. The greatest gift is unconditional love. Now, this quote by Herb Brooks, he says this: the greatest gift a father can give his children is unconditional love. The greatest gift is unconditional love. Now, one way to practice unconditional love is to put your wife's needs above your own when it comes to your marriage. Put your wife's needs above your own when it comes to your marriage. This doesn't mean you always have to say yes to everything she demands. Of course not, right? But it does mean that you should always be considerate of her needs and feelings. Many times I find myself where if I'm having something, my wife tend to only want it. I said to her, why is it that you only want something when I'm eating it or when I'm drinking it? And she said, oh, because it tastes better when you are sharing what it is you're having. I said, but you can have your own, right? And we cannot go through this many, many times. We've been married now 38 years plus as of this recording. So you can imagine we've had our share of experiences. But I find that many husbands would also say, yeah, that's my wife too. She tend to always, you ask her, do you want something? No, I'm okay. But the moment you start eating or drinking, can I have some? I'm thinking, well, why don't you have some when I ask you if you wanted some, right? But I find myself many times if I'm having something and I know she's home and I'm enjoying it, I want to go to wherever she is and say, do you want some? Do you want a taste of this? Because a part of me feel like, why wouldn't I want her to have the same enjoyment that I'm having and just what I'm tasting or drinking, right? It doesn't always happen. Most times though, if she's home, I tend to do that. And I think it's one of those ways of putting, of saying, well, thinking about her and being considerate of her needs and feelings. So point number 3 is, again, if the goal of yours, right, is if you're going to build bulletproof marriages, raise exceptional children, and leave a lasting legacy of faith, love, and impact, right? You must not only do this, I want to mention the first thing. Not only must you seek God's wisdom and guidance, not only must you operate with unconditional love and selflessness, but you also must have open and honest communication. Open and honest communication. Now, open and honest communication is a practice of sharing your thoughts, your feelings, and needs in clear, direct, but very respectful way, right? It's important that we learn how to share our thoughts. As a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified relationship coach, having been doing this for almost 2 decades now, I find that the many, many hundreds of clients I've worked with, couples especially, I find this to be an issue in what they tend to show up for and ask me to help them with. And this, I would say 99% of the times that I've seen, I would say, let me just be conservative, 95% and counting, majority of the couples start off by saying, we just don't communicate. We just don't see eye to eye. And this idea of communication is one of the biggest things or hurdles that gets into marriages. So if you're going to have open and honest communication, what you're doing is constantly practicing sharing your thoughts and your feelings and your needs in a very clear, direct, and respectful way. It's taken me a long time to learn this. I did not learn this earlier on in my marriage. I didn't know. I didn't really see my dad and my mom communicate in this way. So I didn't have necessarily a frame of reference in the early years of my life. Of course, as I got older and I got in the field and working in the areas I've worked, I've gotten a whole lot better on this, and so has my wife, as you can just imagine. Now, what you also want to make sure that when you're doing this, you have a safe and supportive environment. Create a safe and supportive environment, because you're going to be vulnerable when you're sharing your thoughts and your feelings to your spouse, right? So you want to have to make sure that there's not any judgment and criticism and debate that takes place there. So a safe and supportive environment is one where you and your spouse feel comfortable expressing yourselves freely without fear of judgment or criticism. Now, that's not going to happen by itself. You've got to create that. You and your wife have to sit down and create what I call a safe emotional zone where you can have this conversation so that you can share your thoughts and your feelings, and she can do likewise without feeling judged. I think Proverbs, again, Solomon says in Proverbs 15, verse 1, he says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. So what happened is, if you're in an environment where there are harsh words being exchanged, it's only going to lead to more anger. It's only going to exacerbate the situation, right? So it's not going to be helpful. You want to create an environment where there can be gentle answers, gentle dialogue, because that turns away wrath, and it invites more conversations that are healthy and helpful. Tony Robbins made this statement. He says, communication is the lifeblood of any relationship. Communication is the lifeblood of any relationship. And he's so true. It's so true. When you don't have the open and honest communication where you're sharing yourself, your heart, your thoughts, and your emotions, then you're not really truly being fully authentic or honest with your communication. But it's a lifeblood of any relationship. So one way to improve communication in your home, in your family, is to establish a regular time for family check-ins. In the business of our time, our world today, where we're the hustle and the bustle and running your business and trying to get everything done and trying to take care of the family. And I mentioned this in the last video and episode of my podcast. You may want to go back and watch or listen to that. Where in the business, the hustle and bustle, we've got to create time. We've got to make time for this kind of things. It's not going to happen just by chance. So if you're going to be the husband that make this impact on your, create this legacy for time to come, then you've got to be able to be intentional here, right? Be very intentional. So you have regular check-ins. Everyone can share what's going on in their lives and what they're grateful for and what they need from each other. I find many times it's at dinner time, right? If you have a dinner time on a weekend, if you don't have a chance to have dinner at any one point in the week because of different schedules, maybe by the weekend, you schedule at least 1 to 2 days where the family sits down together and you can have the conversations. You could ask questions. You can come prepared and talk about those things. You could pray for those needs that are being mentioned at the dinner table. But you've got to find a way to connect in this manner if you're going to have bulletproof marriages and raise exceptional children and leave a lasting legacy of faith, of love, and impact. You've got to be intentional here as well. Studies have shown that families with strong communication patterns have lower levels of stress and higher overall well-being. Families that do that, and it's understandable. So why? Because people are on the same page. They're more sensitive to the other people, other family members. They're more empathetic. You can learn those things. You can pray for each other. You can encourage each other. All those things are happening. And no wonder this study shows that families that have strong communication patterns have lower levels of stress and higher overall well-being. In the early years of our lives, of myself with my family, I didn't allow for this. I was behaving like my dad, who was this authoritarian type person. I wouldn't say all the way, but he really did not have time to listen and for us to share our thoughts and our feelings. And I found myself being that way earlier on in as a father, as a husband. And I had to unlearn those things so I could be able to allow my children to speak and share and have a voice of their own, and so they could speak up. Because I realized as they got older and now adults, they're able to communicate and speak up for themselves, assert themselves, and have a voice, and not just have people run over them. Well, I find as I work in my field as a licensed marriage and family therapist, as you can imagine, I hear all kinds of stories. I work with individuals sometimes who come in and they're struggling. They're struggling in their marriage or in any other relationship context, maybe work or otherwise, where they don't find themselves being assertive. They just don't know how to be assertive and not aggressive. And one of the things I work with them is to teach them how to be assertive and why they want to be assertive, because it's a very effective way of communicating their thoughts and their feelings. And so I help them with that. So if you're, again, going to be, as I mentioned before, the husband that build bulletproof marriages, raise exceptional children, and leave a lasting legacy of faith, love, and impact, you must, and the third point I mentioned was have open and honest communication. Now, the fourth point I want to mention is this: you must focus on quality time and shared experiences. Now, quality time is one of those things that is so much of a challenge in the time that we're living in, right? You are experiencing that, haven't you? Your business, your career, trying to get things done, trying to work on the side hustle, trying to work on the full-time job, trying to build this business, and the time it's taken, right? Where can you find the time to have quality time with your family? But quality time is a time spent with someone that, in this case, your wife, your children. Focus on building a connection and creating memories. Remember, your family may not remember a whole lot about what you've said and done for them. They're going to remember the memories that you built with them, the memories you built with them. Shared experiences are just activities that you do together that create a sense of bond and connection, right? Whatever that you are able to do, whether it's through sports or fun events or trips or just in the backyard, those times that you're able to create those experiences, those activities, you may think they're not, it's just too insignificant, and man, no, those matters. Those matter. Those very time spent matter. And I know sometimes it's so busy because, again, you're a high achieving and a professional who's trying to get all these things done, trying to run a business, trying to advance your career. And the last thing you have time for is these seemingly small things. My friend, these small things are what's going to last. These are the small things that are going to build legacy, lasting legacy, and leave an impact upon your family and upon your children. In the scripture in the Old Testament, God told the children of Israel in Deuteronomy 6, he says this: take to heart and impress on the minds of your sons and daughters these words I command you today. Speak about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. God says you impress them, you take time, you make time to make sure your children are learning things from you, especially the things that last forever, which is God's word and adhering to God's principles. Those things are everlasting, above and beyond everything else, because everything else will perish and it's only temporary. You need to focus on the eternal things, the things that will never perish. And the only way to do that, my friend, is spending the time. And I don't want to be guilting you. I understand, because I have found myself to be doing that I've done those things. I'm not here trying to sound like I am this perfect and husband, father. No, I've missed the mark many, many times. And that's why I'm so passionate to try to share with you, especially if find yourself in the early stages of your marriage. Don't allow yourself to be so caught up in what society and the culture and our world is trying to promise you and push you towards. These are very, very important things, my friend. Stephen Covey says this: the most important things in life are not things, but the people in our lives. The most important things in life are not things, but the people in our lives. The late Stephen Covey have made that statement. I love this quote that says, the best gift you can give your family is your time, undivided and intentional. Undivided and intentional. One of my favorite memories with my family is when we used to, when my children were much younger, they're adults now, like I said, but we were much younger, and we would get away for weekends sometimes, for a weekend here and there when we could, just to get, break the monotony. And we would, squeeze in, try to stretch the dollar. It would go away. And on one of those weekends, we went to Orlando, and we were staying at a Comfort Inn. And let me just say, it was no comfort, right? It was no comfort. And I'll never forget my son, who was very, very young at the time. I can't remember how old he was, but very young. Was at single digits. And I'll never forget what he, at that time of his life, he made a statement that had us meaning my wife and myself, because my daughter was much younger then, much younger, so she wouldn't have gotten it. But he made a statement that had us bursting out laughing. Have you ever had a child said something that was like, man, where did that come from? And because it came from a child at that age, it makes it much even more profound and to me much more humorous. So he said this: don't allow yourself to be so caught up in what society and the culture and our world is trying to promise you and push you towards. These are very, very important things, my friend. Where is the dad, mom, where is the comfort in this place? Where is the comfort in this place? At his age, because he knew we were at a Comfort Inn. He was expecting this comfort. It wasn't comfortable. And I mean, as a matter of fact, I remember we checked out of that place the next day and went to another hotel that wasn't too far from where we were staying, because it was not comfortable. So his statement was, where is the comfort in this place. And you know what? He was right. So I want to encourage you to make time for your wife and children and put away your phone when you can, especially when you're spending time with them. I know it's a challenge. This thing right here is a challenge. I get it. It is one of those things that really, really gets in the way so many times. And you know it. And I don't have to convince you of this. I don't want to guilt you either. We all have our challenges. And this is one of our challenges, right? But find a way to put away your phone, turn off the TV, and engage with your family fully. You know, I've gotten older now. And I look back, my kids again are adults. But if I could go back and do anything I could, these are some of the things I'm telling you, I would do a better job at. Thank God I'm not living in guilt and regrets, because I didn't know what I did not know as I know now. So I'm using all that I've learned to help people like yourself. So you'll be amazed at the difference it makes in your relationship. As a matter of fact, I'm seeing and hearing a lot more people today who are taking the time to break away from their phone. They're calling it, you know, all these different new things, like, you know, it's almost like it's so brand new. Phone break. You go for a walk without your phone. Whoa, really? Wow. Profound, brilliant idea. Who would have ever thought about that? Yeah, right? To go for a walk and not have your phone. And these are young people who are trying to get back to what they're missing the most. So I want to encourage you to do that. Now, point number 5 is, if you're going to build bulletproof marriages, raise exceptional children, and leave a lasting legacy of faith, love, and impact as that active, you know, that high achieving professional husband as you are, you must administer loving and consistent discipline. Loving and consistent discipline. Now, I know this word discipline can become one that conjures up in people's head that is punishment, is abuse. No. No biblically Christ follower Christian husband is going to do something like that. They're not going to abuse their children. They're not going to do this punishment where kids are suffering. If that happens, then they're out of line. They are, as the Bible says, doing things out of anger, and God sees that. God will one day hold you accountable of that. So when I use the word discipline here, it's a very, very important word, because the word discipline, as used in the Bible, is where we get the word discipleship, discipline. And this is a very positive word, right? To disciple someone. It means you're taking them under your wing and trying to train them in the way they should, you know, in what you know is best for them. So when I use the word, when I say you must administer loving and consistent, the key word is loving, but also the second key word is consistent. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen parents who will let their yes be yes and their no be no, right? They don't do that. They change their yes from a yes to a no, and they change from a no to a yes. Those are confusing for children. Have I done that? Yes. But I try to make certain that those are the exceptions, not the norm. Because loving and consistent discipline is the practice of setting rules, clear rules, right? Not 15, 20, 30 rules. I teach 3 rules at a time, 3 major rules at a time. And under those 3 major rules, there's some things that can fall under that you just use to describe those rules, but you don't need to have 15 rules. You can't even remember 15, much less, you know, the child who you're trying to have adhere to those rules. So loving and consistent discipline is a practice of setting clear rules and expectations for your children, and then enforcing those rules with love and consistency. One of the things I teach many times is a rule is not a rule if it cannot be enforced and if it cannot be consistently enforced, right? So if you cannot monitor and enforce that rule, don't even make it. Don't even make it, right? So it's important to then have rules, but be loving and consistent. Now, the discipline idea is not about punishment, as I described, where it's abuse. It's about teaching your children right from wrong and helping them develop self-control. That's what it is about discipline. You want your child, why would you not want your child to have self-control? Why would you not want your child to learn right from wrong? If you said, of course I do, well, that's discipline. That is teaching them. That's part of what discipline does. You're discipling them. Proverbs 12, verse 24, Solomon says this: he who spares the rod, that's discipline, hates his son. Strong word, hates his son. But he who loves him disciplines him diligently. So if you don't discipline your children, you don't love him. You don't love her. I don't care what you say. The Bible said, God says, if you don't discipline them, you don't love them. You don't really love them as you think you do. You might feel like you love them, but love requires discipline, discipline, and is how you train up a child. As the Bible said, train up a child in the way they should go, so when they're old, they won't depart from it. Again, that's Proverbs chapter 13. I'm sorry, Proverbs chapter 22, verse 8 talks about that, right? So when I said spare the rod and spoil the child, now I'm one of those who believe that spanking is okay. I'm not from the school of saying you should never spank your child. It's how you spank your child. It should not be in anger. It should not be to should beat a child into submission, right? Where that child is no, it's not. Have I done that in the past? Yes, I've been guilty of that. I learned my lesson though, because I wouldn't say I didn't know better, but I was actually, like I said before, acting like my father, how he raised us. And when he beat us, grew up. Here's the thing, I look back and all six of us, well, five now because one of my sisters died many, many years ago. But we've turned out really well. I mean, we've turned out pretty well, all things considered. So was it pleasurable? Of course not. Of course not. No discipline is pleasurable at the time, but it reaps a great reward in the future. So I find that when you are able to discipline your kids in love and not out of abuse, so spanking is, I believe, very part of this equation. And again, it's how you spank. And I think, I could get into that, but this is not a parenting video, so I won't take some more time. But I'll just say enough. I believe in that. Again, it's how, and it's got to be controlled. It cannot be out of anger, because those things you're crossing the line. And the Bible says anything that you do out of anger is sin, and you're trespassing. You've trespassed, you've crossed the line. Enough I'll say about that. So discipline is about teaching your children to respect authority. It's teaching them how to to make good decisions. It's about teaching them about right and wrong, about self-control. Those are what discipline does for children, right? So when I cannot tell you how much I'm seeing how lack of respect for authority, so many of our young people today, you may have experienced that. Why? Because of the missing father like yourself, who's willing to do these things I'm describing, who's willing to take a stand and teach their children, their sons and their daughters, to respect authority. But here's what happened. If that child does not respect a dad or a mom, and if you allow your son or your daughter to disrespect their mom, your wife, why should they not disrespect their teachers and police force, the police officers or military? Why would they respect their boss? Is it any wonder they easily get fired or written up? Because you didn't teach them that. And so we've got to teach our children how to respect authority, because all authority is given by God. The Bible said in Romans, all authority is given by God, and it's given for a reason, to keep us safe and so on. So you've got to teach your children to first respect you and respect their mom as authority figures. I believe when they learn to respect you and your wife as authority figures, then the chance is they learn how to respect others as well, other figures who are authority in their lives. Research shows that children raised with consistent discipline show better emotional regulation and social skills. Right? Let me say that again. Children raised with consistent discipline show better emotional regulation and social skills. Jim Rohn says this. He said, discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Discipline is a bridge between goals and accomplishment. Now, one way to implement effective discipline is to establish clear hierarchy. Who is the father? Who is the boss? Who is the authority in the home? Not your children. Some kids are running the home as if they are the authority, and parents let them get away with that. I find it so, unfortunately, more about single parent homes, especially single moms, than it does when a father like yourself and a mother are in the home raising their children. Again, I know that we could get off and people may hear this and just say, okay, are you saying that people who raised by a single mom cannot turn out right? Of course, I'm not saying that. So don't get me started on that, okay? Hear what I'm saying. A father and a mother is the best environment for children to be raised. God himself set that up. And so everything else is second best. Everything else is second best. A father and a mother in a home raising children is God's ultimate best. Anything less than that is second or third best. It's not going to compete, never come close. Now, have there been cases where some fathers and mothers have, I would say, should never have even been parents? Of course, they should not be parents. They should give those kids up or not have kids, period. But that's exceptions. I'm talking about biblical, Christian, aspiring professionals. You, father, you, mother, if you're listening as a wife. But I'm talking to you. This is not speaking to everybody else. So you should not be like that, right? So start with minor consequences for minor offenses and gradually increase the severity of the consequences for more serious offenses, okay? Now, point number 6 is if you're going to be able to raise, man, this is getting longer than I was hoping it would have, but I think it's important. If you're going to build bulletproof marriages, raise exceptional children, and leave a lasting legacy of faith, love, and impact, you must be role modeling and operating with Christian values. You must be role modeling, right? So you got to start with you. You can't expect your children and others to be something you're not, right? So role modeling is a practice of acting as an example or a model for others. So here's a question. Would you want 5 years from now, your children, your son, your daughter to be like you? What about 10 years? Would you want them to be operating like you are operating? And the answer may be yes. If the answer is yes, keep on doing what you're doing because you're apparently role modeling the right way. But role modeling is just practicing or acting in a way others can look on and learn from you. So, but not just what role modeling, but it's what you're role modeling. Role modeling Christian values that are, the beliefs that are taught in the Bible. Your actions and your words do have a profound impact, even though you may not think that way, on shaping your children's values, beliefs, and their behaviors. But it also is one of those ways your wife can look on and admire you as her husband. She can be that person, like the proverb says, who speak about you gladly in the town square. She is proud of you. She is not ashamed to raise her voice and speak about you and boast about you to others, her friends. And she wants that kind of husband. Your children wants that kind of dad. So become that. I love what Ephesians 5 verse 1 says, imitate God, therefore, in everything you do, because you are his dear children. Imitate God, therefore, in everything you do, because you are his dear children. So I want to encourage you to strive to embody Christian values in all aspects of your life, from your interactions with your spouse and children to your business dealings. Matthew 5 verse 16 says this, in the same way, let your light so shine before others that they may see your good deeds and then glorify your Father who is in heaven. I love hearing this statement. I grew up hearing that more is caught than taught. More is caught than taught. Your children observe and emulate your actions more than your words. You know that very well. I've always tried to be a role model for my children, especially in my faith. And so I've taken them to church. I pray with them. I've cried with them praying. They see me praying sometimes on even, I didn't even know they were there or were passing by, and didn't expect them to be, showing up at maybe in my office or someplace. I'm praying, and I might be on the ground, prostrate before God, or maybe on my knees, or just, weeping or laughing or worshiping, whatever it is. Be that role model, but taking them to church with you. Don't send them, take them to church. Pray with them. When you pay your tithes and give your offerings to the things of God, let them be involved in that. I didn't do a great job as I should have, I could have done a better job, let's put it that way, in this area. I want to encourage you to do that. So when your kids grow up, it's part of their lives. It's part of their DNA. They don't have to, have to now make it up, because it's something that comes natural to them. So I would, pray with them and taught them about the importance of living a Christian life wherever they are. Have I always done that? No. Have I failed and feel at times like I'm a hypocrite? Yes. But for the most part, with God's help, I've done my best in doing what God's called me to do. I've also tried to be honest and fair and forgiving, even in the face of challenges. These are the things I find will help your children. So if you, again, want to be, like I said, let me go through this really quickly: build bulletproof marriages, raise exceptional children, and leave a lasting legacy of love and faith and impact, then these 6 things are very, very important. Number 1, seek God's guidance and God's wisdom. Number 2, operate with unconditional love and selflessness. Number 3, have open and honest communication. Number 4, focus on quality time and shared experiences. Number 5, to administer loving and consistent discipline. And number 6, it is to be the role model and operate with Christian values. These are very, very important if you're going to become that person. So as a high aspiring or high achieving Christian business professional husband, embracing Christian principles is not just a choice. It is a calling. It is a calling. And so in talking about calling, I want to encourage you to apply the principles we discussed as you're hearing them in this podcast, in this episode, this video, in your own lives, right? Seek God's wisdom, God's guidance. Love your wife unconditionally. Communicate openly and spend quality time. Discipline with love and model Christian values. By doing so, my friend, you can build a life of fulfillment that is truly worth living. I'd love for you to join the conversation and share your experiences, your insights, your thoughts, your questions in the link, down below. I would really love to hear from you in this, because I don't know where you are in this journey, and it's very important that you do that. So make sure you tune in for the next episode, where we'll be talking about finding balance, prioritizing faith, and creating a thriving family life. So you don't want to miss that. So you want to hit subscribe, hit the like button, and hit that notification bell, so you will be reminded of these videos that I put out on a weekly basis, and this podcast that you're listening to, if you're listening to the podcast, also on a weekly basis. My friend, with that said, peace out and God bless. And remember, you are just one skill away. God bless.